multiplayer is arguably more enjoyable than single player. The keyword being arguably though, as playing alone isn't such a bad thing, and truth be told, this is one of the best games for having a fantastic single player experience. In fact, I'm usually a solo player in most games I play, whether it's an MMO or a single player RPG like Dark Souls or more of a multiplayer based game like the Monster Hunter series. I've always tended to play things out by myself first so I can get a grasp on how the game works before I link up with others. I feel like it's my due diligence to learn things by myself so I can learn from my mistakes and really get good at the game. But why is Monster Hunter World such a great game for single player when Monster Hunter has always had a focus on multiplayer? Well, no matter what way you look at it, this particular entry into the series was not designed for multiplayer, at least from the get-go. The game was intended to appeal to a wider audience who may be joining by themselves for the first time without buddies to show them the way. They simplified and added a ton of quality of life mechanics to the series, and they definitely succeeded on this front, as this is Capcom's best-selling game of all time. One of the greatest parts of this game is that it's completely single player, and it's actually encouraged to play it solo just without direct mentioning. It's more of the feeling that you get and the immersion of the world and storytelling through the amazing cutscenes in which we get this awesome solo experience, which we will get into in a bit. First off, this game was a great single player experience as you had more tools than ever at your disposal, including the new specialized tools such as mantles, which greatly alter your gameplay, and you have lots of help from older game aspects such as having a companion by your side, your palico. And the tutorials can be a bit hand-holdy at times, but this game series has always had a huge learning curve, and just because this game simplified a lot of mechanics doesn't mean that this game is simple in any way. And of course, the multiplayer really makes this game series shine and stand out among the rest, but the infrastructure isn't without its flaws. In fact, I believe this game is hampered quite a bit by some aspects of multiplayer. But what aspects am I talking about? The way the game was designed was for modern audience, and there's no doubt in my mind about that. It was designed to be experienced by yourself primarily. At least you're meant to experience everything by yourself first, and only then you're allowed to play multiplayer or at least get help for your quest line, which is a huge restriction in and of itself, and we'll get to the restrictions here in a second, and we'll also try to determine whether these restrictions are healthy for the game and for game design in general. But focusing on the single player aspect of this game, the game does a fantastic job of setting up the world and your role as a hunter through the cutscenes. And honestly, the cutscenes are amazing. They're extremely atmospheric and really set up the monsters you'll have to face very well. New monsters are frequently introduced during these cutscenes, and a few of the early game sequences serve as the player's subtly guided tutorials in a way. Some of the cutscenes, for example, either make a lasting impression or it actually truly teaches you something important. The cutscene with one of the early monsters, Bareth, is actually one of my favorites. It looks amazing, but more importantly, it demonstrates the value of using slinger ammunition that can be found in the wild. If players realize that the ammo in the cutscene is a scatter net, then they've just discovered that it can actually be used to stun monsters temporarily. In this cutscene with Gyrototus, for example, the camera generally switches and concentrates on the wedge beetle in the air for a whole second as Gyrototus jumps into the air and is about to attack the player. And the takeaway from this is that you can utilize these beetles to swing around the area. For Anjanath demonstrates the value of scatter nets and slinger ammunition once more. They can both be utilized to trigger and distract from environmental hazards, such as the falling boulders here. And for Radobon, this one's really subtle, but it demonstrates that the teeth-shaped rocks on the ceiling could be dropped. And in the cutscene for Odogaron, the older hunter lady person, I don't remember her name, she uses a dung pod to try to drive Odogaron away, and that, well, introduces the item to players who haven't used it previously, and it's a really important item. All of the story really sets you up as a new lone hunter too in the world, and it just really teaches you a lot. The world is massive and there are lots of characters to help flesh it out as well, as we've seen. This is the first game in the series to have AAA cutscenes like this actually, and since you always play the role of a silent protagonist in these games, or rather we haven't really had cutscenes, besides text from also silent characters in villages to tell it, the other characters introduced like the handler for example help a lot to drive the narrative in the new world. Still, all the hunting is done by you, which only helps to set your custom character and you by extension up as a complete badass of a hero to the friends you meet. Now, it's no secret that a large part of the community doesn't really care for the cutscenes in Monster Hunter World though, as they'd rather just get to the awesome gameplay, and I don't blame them on that part. This game is just that good. The series has always been that good. I can vouch for that every single day. The main issue with these cutscenes is that you can't skip them. Not ever. Not only are the cutscenes unskippable, but you also can't squad up in multiplayer until you've watched a particular cutscene for the first time. So to revise, not only can you not skip any cutscene, but you also can't play together until a cutscene has played out. Now, how many of these cutscenes are there though? Well, without actually going through and counting, I can roughly say there's a cutscene for nearly every challenging monster in the game, which ends up being a ton. I'm not really a big advocate for this design philosophy at all, especially for cutscenes. It forces you to watch them. I think the player should always have the choice as to how to approach the games they want, especially if they purchased it. Unlike a lot of free games these days where you're forced to sit through cutscenes or phone game ads or even having rechargeable energy so you can even just play the game. There's also no doubt in my mind that there just wasn't a way to make this game work without having the player watch cutscenes first as a requirement to have fun with other hunters and players. Many games have figured out a way of making this work. It can even be as simple as not having other players in the cutscene but still in the game session. But there's evidence that the team behind Monster Hunter really has listened to the player base with the release of Monster Hunter Rise. Capcom's latest game in the series allows for every cutscene to be skipped, whether you've seen it before or not. All this aside, I think I've cracked the real reason behind the design of Monster Hunter World. Unlike Monster Hunter Rise, Monster Hunter World launched on PlayStation and Xbox, and very soon after that got ported to PC, whereas Monster Hunter Rise started as a Switch exclusive only. So Monster Hunter Rise wasn't really marketed to modern audiences and wider audiences from the get-go, so having skippable cutscenes in that game I guess maybe is more justifiable, but in Monster Hunter World it was designed for you to not be able to skip them on purpose. And why is that really? Like, all of this aside, I think I've cracked the real reason behind the design of Monster Hunter World. The team behind this game wanted you to become immersed in the world. So many fans have spoken out in my other videos about why they love Monster Hunter World. This game makes you feel like a true hunter going through every step of the hunt. From learning of a monster's existence, to tracking the monster, all the way to finally having a showdown with them. These cutscenes in Monster Hunter World tell such a great story, and honestly, for the first time that cutscenes were introduced in Monster Hunter ever, it being in Monster Hunter World, the cutscenes are actually really underrated in my opinion. There's a lot going on, and I think they do a fantastic job of setting up the world that you're in. I'm really happy we got Monster Hunter World, but am I happy that the cutscenes are unskippable? It really goes to player preference, I think. In some ways, these unskippable cutscenes are a necessary evil, I would put it. One that I actually do believe turned out better in the long run for many newcomers in the series, but for those of us who like to play through games a second time or are veterans of Monster Hunter, they are absolutely a waste of our precious time, and they can be so infuriating. So this all comes down to whether you enjoy the cutscenes or not, whether you're a solo player, you're a multiplayer player, whether you want story out of games, which Monster Hunter World has always been about just hunting tons of monsters. So they do a pretty good job of delivering a story, honestly. I don't even know how they were able to do it. They just did it through epic cutscenes involving huge monsters and their abilities, and honestly, that's pretty cool. I've also seen a lot of comments asking whether this game is a good game to play by yourself, as lots of players are getting into Monster Hunter World even right now, 5 or 6 years after release. A lot of players still have these questions in their mind. As I said earlier, the gaming landscape these days, it's kind of hard to have buddies to always play games with multiplayer, and that's why I said I'm a big advocate for playing games by yourself. You really get the space to enjoy it and learn from your experiences in games, whether it's like Dark Souls and stuff like that, where you learn by trial and error. And honestly, Monster Hunter World isn't so much different. It's just a ton of boss fights where you're learning monster patterns and how to beat them and where the weak points are and all that, and what kind of weapon you're using as well, what kind of mantle you have, your palicos, you know, how they're geared up and all that. A lot of this stuff you just can't learn in multiplayer, actually, because one of the big flaws in these games is whenever you're playing in multiplayer, buddies can be awesome cooperators and they can help you out a ton and really beast out a monster for you, and that's kind of where the design philosophy falls apart, I believe, in multiplayer these days, especially for co-op. Unless there's some kind of scaling added to games where hunters are scaled down and stuff like that, it can really hamper a new player's experience, and that's why I believe this game is best experienced solo, especially because, well, there's literally restrictions from having you play multiplayer until you watch cutscenes, which are unskippable, but they do teach you a lot of valuable lessons, as I shown before earlier in the video, and they also set up the story to make it have some meaning, especially especially for a custom character, which essentially is you through extension. So at the end of the day, I'm asking all of you guys out there, were these cutscenes being unskippable? Are they a necessary evil? Do we have to have them for the modern audience to prevail, to make this one of Capcom's greatest selling games of all time and ultimately make the game bigger in the long run? Or do they completely hamper a player's experience who purchased the game, who just wants to play games with friends, which Monster Hunter has always been predicated on? I'm asking all of you guys, seriously, please comment down below. This is one of the biggest issues behind Monster Hunter World, and I really want to get to the bottom of this and how we all feel about this. Monster Hunter 6, or the next Monster Hunter title, whatever it's going to be, it hasn't really been announced yet even. We were all looking at spring of 2024. Even I thought that that was the main possibility, but it looks like we might even be getting pushed out to winter or the latter end of the year in 2024. And since I get so many comments on a lot of my videos talking about how people love Monster Hunter World, but they just cannot stand to play it again because there's too many cutscenes to watch, I honestly, I really don't blame them. This game was set up for the one single player experience, especially in a super grindy game where once you do complete that experience, you can just keep playing and keep playing for a ton of extra game content. That's what Monster Hunter World has always been about. So yeah, I ask you guys how you feel about this. So as I was coming up with the ideas for this video, I realized that it pushed more and more into more of an objective criticism, but I want to set the record straight. This game is a fantastic single player experience, even with all these flaws. It's also a great multiplayer experience. I guess it really depends on the order in which you play, because the game, it literally forces your hand to play it and experience it solo first, and then you're able to play multiplayer, which is really backwards, honestly. The game design is just not geared toward multiplayer at first. It really was on that solo experience for the new players who came in, and they did succeed on that, which is a little odd and strange, because that success is leading to greatness in the Monster Hunter series, but at the cost of a really hampered multiplayer experience, especially if multiple new players are trying to play together for the first time. They both have to get their cutscene triggered so that both of them can help each other with each other's quests. It's very backwards, and I'm still a big advocate for this game in general. I love this game, everybody knows that, and all this criticism that I have for it is objectively, I'm just trying to get to a good conclusion with it. But I guess that's all I got to say for today, guys and gals. Like today, I feel like I really came on here really passionate about this idea of game design and whether these cutscenes were a good thing or not. In the long run, for the longevity of Monster Hunter, I do think it was a good thing to do. A lot of the fifth fleeters who played Monster Hunter World for the first time really were enamored by the game, and that led to the huge sales of Monster Hunter World and really popped it off. And we've gotten a lot of great stuff since that, and I have no doubt that the next Monster Hunter title is going to be huge, all because of maybe these cutscenes that really immersed and enamored so many new players into the series. But like I said before, let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Do you think that these cutscenes were a necessary evil, or do you believe that they were absolutely unjustified and should just let players who purchase the game be able to play the game how they want? Please let me know in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed the video, I humbly ask you to consider subscribing to the channel or even leaving a like on the video. It goes a long way, as I'd like to be a long-time content creator on here, and every little bit helps. Either way, I appreciate you guys and gals regardless. I'm signing off for today. This has been Terrorizer, and I'll catch y'all in the next one. Peace!